Welcome back to the show, and we've been shedding light on so many pertinent topics that prevail in our everyday lives and how to deal with it, and more from the adult point of view. So we decided that it was time that we paid attention to what is happening to the young people in our environment, because as we know, due to COVID-19, it is not just us as parents and adults that find ourselves overwhelmed by challenges, but kids and teens as well are facing it, and we as parents really don't know how to deal with the situation. So today, this morning, I have Vanessa Gordon, the SADAG operations manager, and she's going to be talking to us about the impact that this pandemic has had on children, and of course how to deal with it. So thank you so much, and a warm welcome for joining us on the show to be able to, should we say, educate us on a topic that really hasn't been given enough attention.
Thank you so much for having me.
The pleasure is ours. Let's start off by, just giving us a little bit of a breakdown of yourself. I'd like our viewers to just get to know a little bit about Vanessa before we go into the topic itself.
That's perfect. So I'm Vanessa Gordon. I'm the operations manager at SADAG, and I manage a lot of the projects. I interact with a lot of the volunteers, and we also, we try our best to create the awareness, do lots of interviews like this, try and just, share the word and destigmatize mental health.
Which I think is so pertinent and important. I mean, especially through this pandemic, and then recently the unrest that took place, which actually made things a whole lot worse, and the challenges a whole lot worse than what they were initially. And, as we know, there were challenges. I mean, every single day people face challenges in some way or the other. But the pandemic and the unrest has made things a whole lot worse. Let's talk about young people and the types of challenges they're facing. We want our parents and adults to understand, firstly, the challenges they're facing, and then going forward, what it is that we can do to try and make it easier for them and help them and be those support structures to be able to move themselves and overcome those anxieties that they're facing.
So that's a very important question, and definitely I think it's so vital to actually look towards the children and say, okay, what are they experiencing? Their whole lives have changed. Their normal routines of going to school, coming back home, that whole routine has changed. They've had to also deal with a lot of the uncertainty that's been going around, going to school 2 times a week, not going to school, doing online learning, also having to adapt to online learning. A lot of these students are very used to being able to, lift their hands up and ask a question to the teacher, speak to their fellow students or their friends if they're having a little bit of concern. So there's like a lot of different things, and it's an online learning is an entire different forum. I think the same way we've had to adapt to remote working and not being able to interact with our colleagues is a very similar space that the children are in. Teens are getting impacted by so much more because the anxieties that they might have experienced with regards to actually being within the household's space with your parents, with your siblings, it's a completely different space, and getting used to also the new reality. I mean, dealing with grief is a big thing. We aren't able to deal with grief as adults as well. We aren't able to deal with grief like how we used to. We are unable to, follow those processes that help us deal with that grief. So how are the children dealing with, grief of loved ones, grief of losing their teachers, friends? And also, if we really look at it, the grief of losing the way we used to live our lives before. I mean, a simple task like going to the shopping mall for shopping is a protocol-ridden experience. And I think it's very important to know that, these anxieties that they're feeling, that they're experiencing, it needs to be noticed and it needs to be also managed. So how do we do that? How do we do that in this new world with this new space?
Yes. And a lot of the times, I think, being parents, you take it for granted that you're the adult and you're the one that are facing these challenges and these issues and these anxieties, but not paying much attention. We think kids are resilient and they're not going to, should we say, suffer those consequences really badly. But unfortunately, that is not the case. In many instances, I think the kids are more affected than what the adults would be, because they're in an environment where they need to get taught by us how to deal with certain instances and situations they face. So we, in fact, have to actually be those support structures.
And that's a vital thing. It's very important to note that they are actually going to do what we do. And I mean,
Mm,
there's the saying that, like they're going to do what you do and not what you say. And I think it's important for us to also be aware that, okay, we're feeling the uncertainty, we're feeling anxious, we're not feeling well, we're feeling overwhelmed, but to share that, to share that. And that also allows the children then to say, okay, this is a safe space, and I can also share how I'm feeling, my experiences, the way I'm feeling. I'm overwhelmed with school. Create those open spaces and those open conversations for children and young people to actually share it, because
mm,
awareness is vital. Creating that
mm,
conversation, sharing experiences, sorry, and also like noting and understanding that it's okay to not be okay, but it needs to be a space also where you can reach out and you can
mm.
actually get the treatment or the help that you might need. It's so
Yeah.
vital. And I know that it's very, like we've all mentioned,
Mm.
like keep connected, and I think that's a vital thing. It's like
I
keeping
agree
connected.
with you. I think communication is key here. And this is what is happening. I'm going to get into a little bit of trouble here by saying sometimes we get so stuck into our modern technologies with our phones and things that we don't actually realize that we're hearing, but we're not listening. And it's about time, I think, we need to sit down, create that time and that space to be able to understand what it is that the young people are facing and how we can help them move forward. I mean, as we know, there's eating disorders. There's kids are wanting to commit suicide. There's times where they're in a depression and they don't even feel like talking. And it's having to determine that, to ask ourselves, how do we help them get out of it? And I think people like yourselves have those support structures where we can turn back to you and say, how do we help this particular child with that particular situation?
So, I mean, there are so many ways to help, but I think it's also important for parents to know what are the warning signs, what are the symptoms,
Mm,
what am I
mm,
looking for, and as you mentioned, creating that safe space. I think even if you create like that safe space to be like, okay, the family are sharing, for an
mm,
hour every week, or every day you sit for 15 minutes, obviously on that dinner table. Obviously, compartmentalizing your life now with remote working and remote learning is very difficult, but you have to take time for that self-care and also for that suppose. I mean, if you are doing self-care, like you are saying, okay, I'm going to self-care and do something for 15 minutes, that often something the child will then mirror and say, okay, so it's important to do this. It's
mm,
important to do this because if mom is doing or dad is doing it, or my elder siblings are doing it, that means it might be something that's useful. Even if it's reading for leisure for 15 minutes a day, it might make a difference. So parents to look out for those signs and symptoms. It's like, how are their eating habits? Has their sleeping habits changed? Have you noticed this significantly? Are they isolating themselves from their siblings and from yourself? They're not interacting like how they used to. They might have been this really bubbly child that, always used
mm,
to like ask questions, and now they're not doing these things.
mm,
Their hygiene has gone a little bit lower, so they're not looking after themselves. They also might not be, following their routine. Remember, routine
mm,
is vital. It's something that children as well as us adults had before, and it's so
mm,
vital to keep that routine. Yes, it can be chopped and changed, but try and keep a standard routine that you wake up, you get dressed, you start your work, you have your lunch, things like that. Create that routine, so it's that structure that children
mm,
so greatly value, I think.
mm,
And doing these small things, being aware of these things, can get your child the help that when if you're struggling, and even as a parent,
mm.
if you're not sure and you're noticing a few of these things, phone into the helpline, speak to the counselor, and try and get that assistance. Knowledge is power.
Mm, mm. I so agree with you there, and you were talking earlier about the types of spaces these children find themselves in, and having to determine this disorders. What would you say to parents that are finding themselves in these types of situations? What is it that they can do to help their children from a home perspective?
I think, the best thing is to ask questions. Ask questions. Tell your kids, and you can easily say it. You can be like, Peter, I've noticed that you haven't been the same. I noticed that you're not looking after yourself. Is there something going on? Are you managing with online learning? What is troubling you? Often asking those questions also opens up that space for the child to
Mm,
have an open communication. And I think it's vital for you as a parent, as I mentioned, to reach out to the SADAG helpline if you're not sure. And as I mentioned, that knowledge is power. So watch the videos. There are parents talks, there's teachers talks on the SADAG website.
mm.
There are like little videos that you can watch. There's toolkits that can give you that little bit of information, so you can also gauge, where am I coming from, and how do I empower myself to then empower my child.
Talking about those kind of things, what have you encountered during this particular period? Would you say that people are facing the most as far as their kids are concerned? Because we know we're in a very different space now, and I mean, of course, in KZN it's worse because they're facing two things: firstly, the pandemic, and secondly, the unrest.
So there's so much. And even when COVID first had started, when we went into lockdown in March 2020, you know we all thought, okay, we're going to be indoors for 3 weeks. I don't think anyone thought that we would be in
Mm,
this space 18 months later. I don't think
sure.
that. And I mean, we went into this lockdown thinking, oh, you know what, we're going to catch up on certain amount of things. The kids were like, probably like, we're getting a little bit of a holiday. It's going to be a little bit of a downtime, and we're still in that space. So I think it's so difficult to say, like, what is, each person is so unique, each child
Mm,
is so unique, each person is so unique. Everyone experiences things in a very different way. But what
mm,
SADAG has seen is that even those who have never experienced anxiety before, never experienced, feeling this overwhelming feeling overly stressed, unable to manage their daily routine, they are now experiencing anxiety because of the uncertainty around us. There's so much uncertainty, and that often causes us to become anxious, to become worried, to feel overwhelmed, and not know what's going to happen, a week from now or 2 weeks from now. So it's difficult, and we're so used to planning. I feel like we
mm.
love to plan our futures. We have holidays planned, we have things planned in the future, and this is something that we can't do.
Mm. How would we help our kids as far as creating a better environment? Because as we know, with COVID-19, there isn't much of that going out kind of scenario. But we're going to come back to that response soon. We're just going for a quick break, so stay with us.
Would you like to give Sadaka 365 days a year? You can with the Al Imdad Foundation's Daily Sadaka program. Donate as little as R1 a day for a month for each member of your family, up to any specified amount, and receive monthly feedback on where your contributions have made a difference. Visit alimdad.com and download your Daily Sadaka debit order form, or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil in every meal you make. It's naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether you're cooking, frying, or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
Are you ready for the last 10 days of the Mintiest Fabrics annual sale? With savings up to 70% on selected items across the floor, it has been the sale you've all been waiting for. Staggered across the month of August with new items across the board constantly being added to the sale floor. With only 10 more days remaining, it's a sale not to be missed. Mintiest Fabrics, 542 Peter Mokaba Street, Ridge Road, Durban. See you there.
Add a sprinkling of sparkles to your magical parties and special occasions with colorful party supplies and decorations to a wide range of baking goods and tools. Packaging from gift bags to meat bags, foil and polystyrene containers, elegant serviettes and intimate candles to disposable wet wipes. A range of glassware, bakeware and stunning wedding accessories just for you. Wholesale packaging available. Sprinkles and Sparkles Party Shop. You'll want it all. Find us at 431 Inanda Road, Parlock, Durban. Call 031 577 0604. Our operating hours are weekdays from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., weekends and public holidays from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Follow us on Instagram at Spring and Spark.
Africa, as the crisis in Palestine continues, the Africa Muslims Agency teams are on the ground facilitating emergency food and medical assistance to affected families. Donate 15,000 rand or any amount and help the people of Palestine. Call AMA now on 083-251-9376 or donate online at africamuslimsagency.co.za. Africa Muslims Agency, inspiring the spirit of giving.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Welcome back, and we're on air with Vanessa Gordon, and she is the should we say, the operations manager at SADAG, actually encouraging us to get into a space where we educate ourselves on the anxieties and the types of situations that teens and young people are facing, especially now during this pandemic and the unrest. Thank you for joining us. And before we left, we were talking about, a couple of, should we say, positive advices that people can follow to be able to help the young ones move forward in some way from a home perspective before we, of course, reach out to you.
So I think creating that daily routine, knowing that it's not set in stone, having those open conversations with your children, even if you're having, and I know compartmentalizing your life, I know remote working is a lot more from parents than even working in the office. I think sometimes when we were working in the office, it was better because we got home at 5 and we knew this is the time we had like home time. We could spend with our kids, we could spend with our partners, and now it seems to be all muddled together. So maybe also creating that routine for yourself. Remember, if you have a routine and you follow it, they are also going to plug into that routine. So creating those spaces, creating a routine, maybe having fun experiments or, doing some work with them in the evening, or even maybe watching a movie together as a family, something fun, something lighthearted. These things are all things that you can do. And remember, it can be chopped and changed. There's so many different things that you can do that fits with your family, that fits with you. So have a look on the website. There's an entire toolkit of all the options. There's things you can do, activities you can do, even connecting to family members, extended family members, cousins, family, friends, via Zoom or, via WhatsApp. That always helps because remember, before we had the ability to go out, meet extended family members, that interaction often helped the young people to actually, feel a little bit more social. And I think that's an element that might be missing right now as well.
I agree. And before we left for the break, that's where I was coming to, but I wanted to actually bring those other aspects into play first, was that, now kids are cooped up at home and the inevitable what happens is they're either on the cell phone or busy with some form of technology. And it's having to get their mindset to change where we take them outdoors, even if it's in the front yard and play a little bit with them there to be able to, create a different environment as such. And I think there's nothing like that can change a person's perspective. I know a lot of the times us as adults, if we feel like we're in a space at work and we're, getting all stressed out or whatever, you just take a walk outside, get some fresh air, and it really does make a difference. And I think this is what we need to realize is, yes, we do need all this technology in our lives, but sometimes a little bit of grounding goes a long way.
And this helps because, I mean, it's breathing techniques, it's meditation, it's even like short exercise routines that you might do with like the whole family. You know, you go into the living room, you put a music, like a song on, you put some music on, and you do like a routine, you know, and you have that. You can do it every week, you can do it every second day, but you create that space within their routine. So it's also giving that outlet. And I think you're very right in mentioning that sometimes, you know, going outside in the garden or just sitting in the sun for 15 minutes makes the biggest difference. I know I personally, so if I'm feeling overwhelmed and now I have a crisis and I'm feeling overwhelmed and I don't know what to do, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I do breathing techniques. I, you know, do that 1, 2, 3 breathe in, 1, 2, 3 breathe out. And that often helps me because even the 3 minute space of doing that actually helps you refocus, get into a different mindset. So imagine putting that in your daily routine or in your weekly routine. It's creating that different mindset. It's decompressing from the stress you might have experienced with schoolwork, with work, with people's expectations on you.
What is the most important thing you think people need to know as far as this aspect is concerned?
I think it's being aware, knowing the signs and symptoms, even if you are a teen or if you're a young person and you notice this in one of your friends that are not interacting with you like how they used to, they're not connecting with you how they used to, you know, ask the question. And I urge parents that if you're concerned about a loved one or a child or even a sibling, reach out, ask the question. Nothing bad is going to happen from asking that question. In actual fact, you might be creating a space of avenue for that person to be able to reach out. So it's about asking those questions. It's about being present for yourself and for your children and for your family.
One important question. Many of families are facing grief at this moment, and should we say, not getting much closure due to the COVID-19 period and the way burials are being done. And how do parents help their kids get over that? Because you yourself have not received that closure, finding it difficult to comprehend that has actually transpired. But how would we entice our kids into a space to make them understand that it's okay to cry, it's okay to talk about it, it's okay to be able to learn to deal with it from a different perspective? Because that's what the reality is, unfortunately.
And I think that's a very important question. And it's, you know, something that's happening and it's so very real. It's in the now. And I mentioned earlier that, you know, the grieving process is completely different to what we used to have. We used to be able to meet up with our family members, give them a hug, you know, go through the process of like, you know, that whether it be a 7-day process. I know different faiths have different processes that they go through, and you know, a prayer in a month's time, or you know, they have like, you know, these processes that they do. And that often helped our grieving process because we were able to, you know, get to the different spaces and actually understand, okay, this is what the grieving process is, and this is where I am within that grieving process. And now it's completely different. So we've had to now adapt to a different grieving process. And it's been very hard. I think us as adults haven't, you know, gotten to that point where, you know, we can follow a set grieving process and this is what
Yes,
we're doing
exactly.
and this is how we're managing it. And I think, you know, as I mentioned earlier, it's about having those conversations. So say, for example, a family member, a family member has passed away and now you're with your kids and you are grieving. You are also in that space. And I think it's allowing yourself to feel that grief and also sharing that with your children to say, allow them to feel that grief. Speak to them openly about grief, about how you're feeling. So they also feel like, okay, it's okay if I'm feeling like this. As you mentioned, it's okay if I'm feeling like this. It's okay if I'm feeling like I need to cry. It's okay if I'm feeling a bit despondent, you know, and sharing that, you know, sharing stories, sharing like, okay, you know, happier stories on, you know, about that person who may have passed away, you know, also like creating that space for each other. So often, I mean, we used to go to a family's house, or if there was a passing in the family, we would go there and we would share in their mourning. You know,
Right.
create that time for yourself within your home. Do like say, okay, I'm going to book it out in the evening and we're going to sit for, half an hour, and we're going to sit and carry that grieving process through, depending on what your faith is, depending on what your unique needs are. But it's vital to try and, follow a grieving process so that the children can manage their grief and you as well can manage that grief.
I so agree with you there, because a lot of the times what happens is you inevitably take it, put it in the back of your head, forget about it, or should we say, try to forget about it and deal with it in another way. And then there's all different other impacts that it has on yourself and on your family as well. What message would you like to leave us with today? We seem to be running out of time.
That's perfect. So my message today is that if you're needing help, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling overwhelmed and you don't have anyone that you can speak to, or you would like to speak to a counselor, it's completely confidential and you can speak to that counselor and actually find out information, get the help that you need, or even, just ask questions about what you're feeling or a loved one is feeling. Call 0800 567 567, or you can SMS 31393 for a counselor to call you back. Just reach out and know that it's okay to not be okay, but it's okay to reach out.
Thank you so much for being a support structure out there for us and all the younger ones to be able to help us overcome these types of situations that people are facing. So thank you. We really appreciate the time and effort that you've taken to be able to educate us as far as the subject is concerned. And we wish you all the best. And of course, do stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Goodbye. That was Vanessa Gordon from SADAG giving us information, of course, how to deal with the situation and anxieties faced by the younger ones, which I think needed to be discussed at some point. And that's all we have time for today. But I want to leave you with something important. It says, this was written by Khalil Gibran, and he says, "You give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give." So what we're saying is go out there during this very difficult time and give of yourself in many directions selflessly with a sincere heart and a good intention. And it's definitely going to uplift, empower you, and you are going to be sustaining somebody else. So for myself and the team, we want to thank you so much for joining us this Thursday. And do join us next week for another bumper edition of the Nafisa Dango Show. For myself and the team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.